Hello, my name is James Morris and I am the Unit Leader for the Leading, Managing and Developing People Level 7 CIPD unit here at Solent University. This video provides a briefing for Assignment 1. During this short video clip, I will cover 5 key aspects. Firstly, the logistical arrangements for the completion and submission of the assignment, followed by the opportunities which you will have to ask questions and to seek feedback on your assignment. I will then outline the 3 options or essay topics from which you will select one to attempt, and the assessment criteria against which your assignment will be evaluated. Finally, I'll offer you some tips and key reminders. Let us start with the basics. Assignment 1 is an individual assignment in the form of an essay of approximately 3,000 words. You will have a choice from 3 essays to attempt. You select, of course, only one. The mark awarded for your essay will account for 50% of your overall mark for this unit. Assignment 1 must be handed in by 4 p.m. on Monday the 3rd of December 2018 via the Turnitin submission link that you will find on the Assessments tab of the Leading, Managing and Developing People Solent online learning site. In line with Solent regulations, feedback will be received within 4 weeks of the submission deadline. If you have any questions on anything that I've already said, which follows in the remainder of this video, or about your assignment more generally, please feel free to speak with your tutor in class. This is often the most effective way of seeking clarification. Alternatively, of course, you can email your tutor or send a message via the Solent Online Learning's online forum. We are also providing you with an opportunity to submit and receive feedback on a draft. You will be required to submit your draft online via a link on the Assessments tab of the Leading, Managing and Developing People Solent online learning site. If you wish to take advantage of this opportunity, you must submit your draft by 4 p.m. on Friday the 9th of November 2018. You may submit work at whatever stage you have reached by this time, whether that be a finished first draft, a skeleton outline, or anything in between. If you have any questions, please do not wait until this stage to ask them. Your tutor will happily answer any questions or look at skeleton outlines and plans you have during your weekly classroom sessions. Moving on to the choices of essay topic available to you. The 3 topics are employee engagement, leader and leadership development, and employee well-being. I will now briefly explore each of these with reference to the explanations provided in the assessment brief. The first topic is employee engagement. Critically explore the ways in which organisations might seek to measure and improve the current level of employee engagement, and why should anyone invest in building an engaged workforce. Note the use of the words critically explore. Critically requires evaluative activity to take place. It is not sufficient to explain or describe. Note too the multifaceted nature of this topic and the question you're asked. You are required to explore how levels of employee engagement might be measured and how those might be improved, and essentially to outline the business case for enhancing levels of employee engagement. You may conclude that you could usefully reverse the running order of these points when you structure your essay. For example, you might wish to start with a critical exploration of the business case for investing in the engagement of the workforce, before going on to consider how an organisation might measure or monitor levels of engagement, perhaps through surveys such as Gallup Q12 or other approaches, or the analysis of metrics. For example, we know from research that absence rates tend to be lower in highly engaged workforce groups than would otherwise be typical. And you might do this then before turning finally to the ways in which organisations might seek to improve or drive up levels of employee engagement. This is an interesting question, and as will be clear from the marking scheme, organisational examples are important. But do be careful not to merely describe what an organisation does. Remember the requirement here to critically explore. The second question, or the second option, relates to the approaches to the development of leaders and leadership and the effectiveness of those approaches. Critically evaluate the characteristics and effectiveness of a development method used to develop leaders and leadership in organisations. Again, note the words critically evaluate. Your work needs to go beyond description or explanation, critically evaluating the aspects under discussion. Please note also that there are two parts to this question which you are asked to look at. You are asked to look at the characteristics as well as the effectiveness of leader and leadership development. These appear subtly, but are in fact very importantly different. Whilst it would be useful for you to show an awareness and appreciation of a range of methods used for developing leaders and leadership, please note that the task requires you to critically evaluate a development method used for that purpose. A development method might be leadership coaching or a formal training program, such as accelerated leadership development. So the requirement here is for a broad awareness, but with a depth of analysis relating to a development method. In considering the effectiveness of your chosen method, you may well wish to compare and contrast its attributes with other methods that might otherwise be available. You should also consider referring to organisations that deploy the method you are evaluating, but again be wary of merely describing what organisations do. Remember here, the requirement is for critical evaluation, and remember the need to link to underpinning theory as it relates to the subject. Finally, the third option, employee well-being. You are asked to advise your own organisation about how it might go about substantially improving employee well-being. What would be your top 5 recommendations? Justify your answer with empirical evidence. The key difference for this topic is the requirement to root your answer firmly in the context of your own organisation. You will of course therefore be required to give a very brief introduction to your organisation, its sector, its scale and the nature of its workforce. But please do be careful, the reader needs only a brief explanation here. Don't consume too many of your valuable word count on this. In order to advise your organisation on its approach to substantially improving employee well-being, and therefore to identify your top 5 recommendations, You will clearly be required to critically evaluate the approaches which might be available to organisations and to consider what other organisations do or have done and how effective these efforts have been. Therefore, you may wish to consider issues such as: what do we mean by employee well-being? What is the business case for focusing on it? Is employee well-being something that's any business of the employer, or is it simply a private or personal matter? How can organisations seek to improve employee well-being? How effective are those approaches? And does the industry, the sector, size or nature of an organisation impact upon its approach or available approaches to employee well-being? And finally, of course, what would you recommend in the context of your own organisation? Whilst this topic title does not include the words critically evaluate, it is clearly implied in the requirement to justify your answer with empirical evidence. Moving on to how your work is assessed. You have a detailed assessment matrix in the assessment brief, which describes for you the 5 criteria against which your work will be assessed and paints a pen picture of what an assignment at each grade mark level would look like against each of the 5 criteria. You will note that some 70% of the mark, that's the red and blue areas on the chart, is based upon the extent to which you engage with both a critical exploration of the literature on your chosen topic and the selection and application of organisational examples. These are the 2 aspects which then enable you to demonstrate your knowledge and understanding of the subject area, which itself accounts for a further 20% of the mark. The remaining 10% focuses on how you present your work, not just physically how it's presented, although this is of course important, but more so in terms of how persuasively you construct an intelligent and reasoned argument, which is supported by appropriate literature that of course you cite and reference accurately. I must stress here the need to both cite and reference the literature you use accurately. We use the Harvard standard for referencing, and you will find the library leaflet referencing the Harvard way useful in supporting this. Credit for the citation and referencing requirements is inherent within selection and the use of relevant theoretical, empirical and practitioner literature. If you have any questions on this, please ask them. If a question is on your mind, it's an important one. The only silly question is the one which is never asked. To wrap up this short briefing, let me say one further thing. Please do not be under the illusion that any of these 3 options is a so-called easy choice. They are all challenging in different ways, but provide, I hope, an opportunity for you to explore an aspect or aspects of the unit and its material that both interests you and is relevant for your organisation. So I offer you a few useful points to remember. You are writing an essay. You are not writing a report. So therefore, no headings, charts, diagrams, pictures, lists or appendices should be included. You must follow the Harvard standard for all in-text citations and in your bibliography, which will appear at the end of your essay and is not included in the word count. Your bibliography is usually the first part of your assignment that your tutor will read. It tells them where you have been and, just as importantly, where you've not. Judicious use of in-text citation is how you show the depth of your reading and understanding of the subject. Focus. You only have 3,000 words approximately. You simply cannot tell the reader everything you know about a subject. You must therefore be selective and build a clear argument. The instructions on the word count on the assignment briefing are clear. If you write much below the word count, you are very unlikely to have demonstrated sufficient depth. Writing much over it, and your mark will reflect the fact that you have exceeded the word count. I'm often asked about organisational examples. They are absolutely essential, but I'm reluctant to be too prescriptive here in terms of their number. But as a guide, I would say using one is probably too few to enable you to critically contrast approaches that might be taken or experiences that have been observed. Using more than about 3 or 4 is likely to require too much description for the word count that you have available and leave you insufficient scope for analysis. Please ensure that you hand in on time. Please try not to leave it until the very last moment. It's always possible that you could have a problem with the technology. You can of course submit at any time between now and the deadline. A couple of final suggestions from me. Firstly, you should start the assignment as soon as you can. The earlier you start, the larger window of time you allow yourself to reflect, which is a critical activity when adopting a strategic approach. And secondly, please do keep a record of the sources that you use as you go. Don't leave the construction of your bibliography until after you've completed your essay. Create it as you go. Finally, I'd like to thank you for taking the time to listen to this short video clip. I hope you found it useful, and I'd like to wish you the very best of luck with your assignment. Your tutors are here to support you. Please make use of that support.